Hey, I hope you are doing good. This is Matt Bechtel with Book Brilliant, and I've got a great episode today with a very nice guy, Brendan B. Brown from Wheatus. Wheatus is currently on the Summerland tour along with Everclear, Living Color, and Hoobastank, and it's one heck of a tour if you get the chance to go. Great bands that you probably grew up listening to, playing their hits, maybe a couple covers. It's a good show, and I hope everybody listening gets a chance to check it out. I'll be there when they come to my town. Uh, just wanted to remind everybody, um, I transcribe every interview that we do, and I put it on our website at bookbrilliant.com. If you look into the show notes, you can find it. The reason why I do that is if there's anything reference that you want to follow up on, I try to hyperlink everything. And then every book that we reference here is also on the web page for the podcast episode as well. So I try to make this very, very listener friendly by doing that. But this interview with Brendan, it was great, and I knew it was going to be great. Uh, Pretty much right off the bat, he was the earliest out of any of the guests that I've had so far. Before him, Mike Kruger from Nickelback was actually the earliest. He came on 1 minute early. And it was funny because with Brendan, I had opened up the meeting and like literally 30 seconds that I wasn't even set up yet, all of a sudden, boom, he was right there. And so we talked for a bit before the actual interview started, and we talked afterwards, and I had a lot of fun talking to him. And I think there's some really great stories, and it's interesting. So I can't wait for you to listen. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I've got Brendan B. Brown from Wheatus with me today. How are you doing today, Brendan?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good. So you got to leave for tour pretty soon, huh?
I know we barely have any time off. I'm happy to say. Uh, we've been getting busier, despite the pandemic, and or sorry, I should say, the pandemic notwithstanding, we have gotten busier over the last 5 years in ways that I couldn't have predicted. I would have thought it was slowing down, but it's picking up. So
That's good. Well,
yeah,
good
cool.
for you guys. I was listening to some of your interviews before this, and I may be the first person to interview you who has seen the movie The Last Dragon.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah, I love that movie. That around the time the Karate Kid came out, it was like really popular, 1984, 1985. And The Last Dragon is a Motown movie. That's a Motown, Records movie. That's Barry Gordy put that together. So it was like this totally different, like music, New York City based version of some kind of story like that. And it also had a little bit of the supernatural element, which made it, I think, a little bit cooler,
Yeah, it was interesting. There's an age gap between myself and my siblings. All my siblings grew up in the 80s, and I was born in 94. And so my oldest brother, he's a tough dude, had a childhood like yours, getting into some street fights, right? And that movie is one of his favorite movies. And after I watched it, I texted him and I was like, I don't really get it, man. And he just texted me back, Leroy Green is not a tree that you want to climb. All right. Okay.
That's funny, man. That's funny. Well, so it's a very, very this very period sensitive movie.
Yeah.
Like it was like, it spoke to me during that time, on a lot of different levels. First of all, I like the fact that it was a New York City film.
Yeah.
Second, there's a ton of great music in the movie.
Yeah.
Third, that's sort of like the gangster element and the threat of certain death and all that stuff. That felt simultaneously, it was a little bit more goofy and a little bit more realistic to me.
Yeah.
So it was a bit more fun that way, and closer to home. So it was like, I don't know, it's just kind of, it just hit me in particular. Also, like, growing up in the immediate suburbs of New York City, I guess I grew up about an hour away from the city, and I took the train to high school. I commuted to high school back and forth every day, and it was closer to New York City than it was to my high school. But I always looked at the city and off in the distance as this place I wanted to be, the energy I wanted to be a part of, the integration, the mix of cultures and and ideas. Found the place that I grew up kind of boring and violent and stagnant, and I wanted to reach out to it, and every chance I got to go into the city with my mom or my dad, if they were doing it, I would do it, so it spoke to me on that level too,
I could definitely see that.
Yeah,
I could see how with your background and coming up in that time period in the area that you're at, that's a perfect concoction. So well, I wanted to kind of tell a quick story of what your music means to me. And I know in a lot of interviews people focus a lot on Teenage Dirtbag, and I've listened to all your records. 14 is an amazing song. It's actually one of my favorites from your last album. But when I heard Teenage Dirtbag for the first time, I was a freshman in high school, and my older sister had showed it to me, and I fell in love with it because there was a girl that I had a crush on at the time, whose boyfriend had a fast car, kind of like an IROC, and he threatened to beat my ass. And I was a small kid, and it scared me. And so I came into high school afraid every day. But his girlfriend was nice to me, and that song just really hit home. But I wanted to ask you, I know you went to an all-boys high school. And so I wanted to know if you had the most had a story of when you felt the most like a teenage dirtbag with a girl, because I kind of have a BMX Bandits teenage dirtbag story that kind of rolls together. I wanted to share with you. It's kind of funny. When I was 15, I had my first job, and I saved up and I bought a BMX bike. All my friends BMX, and I was only
what
one.
Kind? What brand?
So my first bike, well, I'll say this: everybody had a BMX bike, but me, I had a mountain bike. And so the first bike I got was a blue DK. It was the cheapest one on Dan's Comp.
Yeah.
It was like $120.
I was just on Dan's Comp before you call before this call. So I'm looking for titanium forks. I'm looking for a pair of 24-inch titanium forks. I don't know who makes them, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. That's really funny. So cheapest bike on Dance Comp that looked somewhat cool. And so I was 15, and there was this girl that I really had a big crush on. She was new to the school, and she hung out with some of the more popular, maybe more richer girls. And my friends and I, we weren't rich, we weren't poor. We had, more than some and less than others, I guess. But I always went off for like these girls that my friends never, I guess, that were a tier higher than my level, right? I was overshooting my par. And so these girls were all hanging out one night, and somehow I was messaging one of them, and I got invited to go. And so I rode my BMX bike there, and I immediately felt out of place. I go to this house, and it's the biggest house I've ever been in, and I'm instantly out of place. And then they invited these guys over, and they pull up in a car. And so I instantly just feel like really stupid. They've got better clothes than me. They're in a car. I'm on this bike. And so I go at the end of the night. It's just an embarrassing night. I didn't get anything out of it that I was hoping. And so I go to leave because I was the only one with the curfew too. So my parents are making it harder and harder for me to be cool. So I'm the only one with the curfew. And when I go to leave, I go to hop on my bike, and the tires were flat because I had the stock tires, and I had ridden through a thorn bush on the way there. And so no. I was also the only one without a cell phone. So then I had to go back, and I'd asked this girl if I could use her phone, and she told me no. And I had to beg this other girl in front of the girl I liked. I had to literally beg her to let me use her phone. So I call up my dad. My dad pulls up in this piece of crap Jimmy that made this really loud knock noise, and they're all like right there. And he starts yelling at me about my tire being flat because he was tired of fixing them. And it was so humiliating. And so I was laying in bed that night just crying and so embarrassed. And it's funny now, but I really think that stuff is what made me ambitious, because I was like, I don't ever want to be on the outside again. It made me want to be somebody. It made me want to be the one, I guess, with the nice stuff. So that was the most time I ever felt like a teenage dirtbag.
That's a good one, man. You should write your own song about that. Yeah. That's tough. That's tough. That's a tough lesson. You rolled your dice and you came up, with two flats.
Do you ever have any stories like that where you struck out with a girl?
that's a sort of like a kind of a goofy story, and I'm sure that you were embarrassed and pretty ashamed. But I can't. I didn't know a lot of girls in high school at all. Like,
Yeah.
it was really like I said, I commuted to and from school. The whole round trip commute was 3 hours, and
Yeah.
it was like, on a train with adults and stuff. There wasn't a lot of like socializing that went on during the trip. And then, I was in that group of kids who lived so far away from the school that we got to skip homeroom because there was only the train schedule wouldn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to meet anybody in my homeroom ever. So it was like lunchtime. I hung out with some dudes at a lunch table for a while, but had some sort of like 1 or 2 weekend hangouts that I convinced my mom to drive me to. But that was the other hassle because all these kids lived far away. So my mom was, I'm not driving you on a Saturday to Rockville Center, Lido Beach, forget it. So it was like, it was my high school experience was rather detached, and any kind of typical social interaction that you would have to discuss later in life. I wouldn't. In place of that, I have like lots of train rides looking through the window kind of thing. So a lot of what I thought of high school experience or teenage adolescent socialization, all that was sort of hypothetical to me. It was like, oh well, this is probably happening somewhere to some kid. So it was like there was a lot of like that thought process of just like what was going on. The other thing was this, the kids in my hometown were like the fact that I went to a boys' school was like pretty not a good thing as far as they were concerned in any number of ways. You name it, homophobia, you're a rich kid, whatever it was. So the school wasn't really a rich kid school. It was the majority of people who sent their kids there were cops and firemen, public servants, teachers and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, and from school districts around Long Island that were like not getting it done. So there was people were like scraping some extra money together to send their kids. It wasn't that expensive. I think it was like $2,500 a year or something.
Yeah.
But it was really kind of rigorous, just almost militaristic kind of education. And 3 hours of homework a night. I was on the wrestling team for a little while. But when you're talking about the typical like boy-girl scenarios, there's only two really kind of clumsy ones that I can come up with. The one of them is a little bit too, I'd rather not talk about that one. But the short story is that somebody dated me as a cover boyfriend. I didn't really know, like for about a month,
Oh yeah.
Because they weren't allowed to date their real boyfriend. And and then this other time, I think my mom kind of knew that it was like somewhere inside that maybe wasn't the best way to grow up. So she was, meaning well, but sort of trying to set me up on stuff. So she would talk to somebody's parents and they would try to have, like that kind of shit. And all I wanted to do was play guitar. I had like by sophomore year, I could kind of given up on social life. I was just like, just put me in the room with a guitar. I don't want to talk to anybody. I was like, kind of accepted loneliness as like a, a identity, you know what I mean? So, I was supposed to, the idea was that I was supposed to ask this girl to the prom, and I wound up at her house in the next county over from where I lived. So I didn't know anybody from her hometown or anything like that. And, she went to a Catholic girls' school. But anyway, I didn't know her, but my mother knew her mother, or my mother knew her mother's best friends, some shit. I don't even remember. But I wound up there, and they were all kind of like one at a time, like, you should ask, so-and-so to the Chaminade prom and whatever. So I'm kind of like building up the courage to do it. And I walk outside, and I didn't know this at the time, but she had a 19-year-old boyfriend.
Ooh.
And I was 15, going on 16.
Yeah.
And him and his friends just surrounded me.
Oh no.
They knew I was there, and I didn't know even who they were. It was just absolutely like terrifying, embarrassing thing where I was just like, who are these people? You know, this dude is basically a man, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
step into me. And he's in my face and he's like shouting and cussing, if you knew about me, then I'm gonna fucking rip your head off. And if you didn't know about me, then she's a fucking slut. Like that kind of like Long Island, like really like intense. And I didn't see any of it coming. And the crazy thing to me was that parents didn't intervene. They're just kind of watching.
Whoa. Yeah.
So I was like in a stranger's house, in a stranger's driveway. I didn't come with anybody. You know what I'm saying? Or any dudes anyway. I was like solo dude. And it was a total kind of like a weird setup that I was like already nervous about. And then this fucking 6th-year senior is in my face.
That's like worst case scenario.
And he was with his boys. He was with like, and I was like, oh shit, I'm going to catch it. I showed up here to catch a beat down. That's what's going on here. So
that's crazy.
After that, I became sort of like even more cynical than I had ever been. I was kind of like, no. Yeah,
man. Listening to how you grew up in your town, and I wanted to touch base on a couple things with that later on, but I'm sorry about how the way you were treated when I hear about those ridiculous, bowling stories or the kid that broke your arm. I mean, you didn't deserve that as a kid. Nobody does. And I can tell you, I live in Nebraska, and there's something about your hometown that's just kind of strange when I hear the stories about it, because while there's similar stories everywhere, I think of, the weird kids that go hang out in the woods and do drugs and the fights and stuff like that, it just seemed a lot more intense in your area. And so that was one thing that, in researching for this, I felt bad about, but it made you who you are. And, you're obviously a nice guy.
Actually, I'd go so far as to say it made me who I'm not.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I can still fight. I'm not afraid of getting punched and, beat up or any of that stuff. But I and that's different. We have a lot of millennials in the band, and when I talk about some of the shit, they're kind of like, what? And I'm like, they broke my arm, and they thought it was funny. Like made fun of me the next day with the cast. You know what I mean? Like it was just like. It was a gladiator academy, and I didn't know anything else, So what you do is like in that kind of circumstance, you grow up. Unfortunately, you learn how to communicate in warnings.
Yeah.
So, and it's a hostile way to be, and it took me a long time to socialize. I'm still something I'm working on.
Yeah.
So, but I think that the upside of it is like, there's a lot of stuff I'm not afraid of, like a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm acutely afraid of because of it, more so than other people. So like, I think my spider senses are a little bit more, on high alert all the time. I talk to somebody once a week about it, a therapist, and made a lot of progress over the years. But, learning how not to communicate in warnings has been, a project. Yeah.
I want to ask a 2-part question here.
Yeah.
Number one, do you have a favorite book? But also number 2, do you have a book that helped you with, some of those childhood wounds? Because everybody, I think, to some degree, has a childhood wound. I've had something a couple months ago where I'm like, oh, why did that hurt so bad? And I'm like, oh, because I felt like a boy, and so do you have any books, maybe anything that's helped you with that?
They're still trying to write the book about where I grew up. So I don't like The Outsiders is kind of like a thing. To Kill a Mockingbird, the sort of high school curriculum books, but and nothing that made me, what did Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
That was a big one. I had to read that in high school. And there's 2 types of books that I have experience with. There's the ones that I have a very severe reading disability. It's physically painful to read, right?
Okay.
But that's a good acid test, because if you rip through something with that kind of problem, you really know you're into it.
Yeah.
So like I said, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning was high on the list. In particular, the scene where there's one scene where a Gestapo officer spits into one of the prisoners' bowls of soup,
Yeah.
and he has to drink it, or else something way worse is going to happen. So the sort of like imagination required for survival in that moment was I found that appealing and inspirational. And also I earlier than that, the first book I read kind of on my own was Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Okay.
Which was I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's Richard Bach.
I don't think I am.
Yeah, check that out. It's I would call it like a young reader's book, but like a kind of semi-serious one.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a sort of story about a seagull who learns to escape his sort of like the seagull life,
Yeah.
the garbage picking sort of like scrapping seagull life.
That's kind of cool, yeah.
And way early on, I think I might have been maybe 9 or 10 when I read that book, and it was the first serious book that I read cover to cover on my own, volition.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the early ones, I guess.
Were you ever a fan of The Catcher in the Rye?
Well, no. I had to read it a couple times. I was assigned that a few times, and I found it sort of tedious. Like when I was younger,
yeah,
I didn't relate to Holden. I thought he was kind of a brat.
Yeah.
And I know that like the baby boom has kind of taken that book into like the stratosphere of like, this is the political dichotomy of the United States. There are liberals like Holden, and there are right wingers who think he should clean up his act and blah. And I just don't subscribe to that. I think baby boomers put way too much faith in J.D. Salinger, who, if you ask me, turned out to be quite a big fucking giant asshole.
Yeah.
So, I just I never really could choke that one down with a smile.
Yeah, I you know what? I've never met anybody who liked it. To be honest with you, I had a librarian once who I was like, I asked him if they had The Catcher in the Rye, and he made a comment like, if I read that book, I'd shoot. And then he stopped what he was saying. I was like, damn, dude. But I read it, and I didn't mind it. It was hard to understand like what the hell's the point of this. And even after finishing it, I had to watch a couple different videos and read some breakdowns of like trying to understand what his point was that he was trying to get across. Cause I didn't read it in school, but I finished that. Actually, what's weird is I was recording, my band just released our first album earlier this year.
Oh, congrats.
I finished thank you. I finished that book in the recording studio, ironically enough, but I also had read Viktor Frankl's book last year as well.
Okay.
So yeah, no, those are some good picks. Do you have just in general a favorite book? Nothing about it being serious, just a book that you.
Well, I guess it would be from my first sort of like early identity book would definitely be Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yeah.
But after that, as a young adult identity book, I would say probably Mother Night or Breakfast of Champions, the Kurt Vonnegut books. Kurt Vonnegut became a sort of fascination of mine via a friend who had a pen pal with him.
Wow.
When I was in my late teens, early 20s. And I actually met him one time, which is what the event that started the pen pals. A really funny story. But the short version is that my friend from senior year of high school, I befriended somebody finally at long last, and we hung down through college, summertime buddy during college.
Yeah.
And we were out at his parents' sort of like north side bungalow out in the Hamptons. They had this like little shack that they owned. They called it Muffy and Buffy's, and it was on the north side of town where the people who worked all year round out there live. You know, not the beach, the big sort of special beach pass town part, but the working class section. And his mom shooed us away one day because just a couple of douchebags with Primus shirts and cut off jeans, and she says, "Here, it's $20. Go to the Bridgehampton Public Library is having a sale." So we go down there, and it's like a $10 cover to get into the library.
Jeez.
We only have a 20, so, and it's really fancy. It was looked like the Kentucky Derbies, like these ladies with these hats and all this like regalia,
Wow.
So the security guard sees that we're at the wrong door, if you will, and he's like, "Oh, they're having a used book sale around the corner at the garage, right?" So we go down there, and my friend Chris, who was going to Villanova, was after his first year at Villanova, had become obsessed with Vonnegut and bought a stack of his original books, right? Wow. And he's kind of I didn't really know who Vonnegut was at the time, and he's kind of introducing him to me. He's like, he's this dude. He's like survived the bombing in Dresden as a prisoner of war, and he rolls his own cigarettes, and he's this weird, kind of post-beat, not quite a hippie guy, but he's real scientific and shit. And I look up, he's showing me a picture of Vonnegut on the inside of the Breakfast of Champions edition.
Yeah.
And I look up, and the motherfucker is walking right towards us. And he takes the book out of our hands, and he's flipping through it, and we're both kind of,
Yeah.
And he signs one of the books, and Chris gets his address, and the two of them had a pen pal for a little while. But after that, that happened when I was 19, I started kind of checking out Vonnegut and reading some Vonnegut. And I think Mother Night's probably my favorite. The Timequake is really good too.
I'm going to have to look all those up later, because when you were saying that, I was seeing what I had for Vonnegut. The only one I really have is Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. That's the classic. That's
that's like the big one with him.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. And I wanted to ask you if you had read the book, The Acid King, but then I'd heard you say that your friend actually wrote it.
Yeah.
Have you read it? And so your friend actually did write that book?
Yeah, he did. My friend Jesse Pollock wrote that book. I would say that's as close to an accurate telling of the story of what happened in my hometown as you can get. Jesse talked to me all throughout the writing, and while he was doing his research, not so much for me to help him write it, not at all really, but for me to just when it got frustrating, he would give me a call, and we would bitch about Northport or something. So, he's I think he got it right. I think he kind of got, for the first time, the strangeness of it, and the sort of the sort of wanton violence of the town, and what was going on and what was normal. You have to if you just take a couple of cues from the police report first, that these kids were the night of the murder, they were doing what was routine for them, was smoking 15 bags of angel dust and taking 10 hits of acid. You say that and you're like, isn't somebody going to die from that? And it's that's what they were used to. That's in the police report. And the other thing that's in the police report that's important to remember is that 2.5 weeks went by where the sort of Ricky Casso, the guy who really kind of committed the murder, led guided tours of the body.
Yeah.
He took people up in the woods and showed them his classmates, people who knew Gary Lauwers and were on, little league teams with him and so on, known him their whole life, and none of them snitched.
Yeah.
Nobody from Northport opened their mouth ever. It was another girl from another town who overheard something at the movie theater and told her parents, and her parents called the cops, and that's how it was revealed.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening who may not know about the story, basically what it was, his name was Ricky Casso, right?
Yeah.
And so he had killed a kid named Gary that they grew up together, right?
Yeah.
And they say that it may have been because Gary might have stole some drugs from him.
That was what was seems to be the case. But that's a hell of a penalty for snatching some drugs from your high school buddy.
Yeah. And you had an interaction with that kid, I think, shortly before he killed Gary. But yes, so he stabs him to death. Is that a true story that he was making him say you love Satan, and then the kid
Yeah,
said I love my
yeah,
mom?
that's
So
in the police report too. Yeah,
that's true. So yeah, he stabs his kid to death. And then what's crazy is when we were talking earlier about, Brendan's hometown, Ricky was taking kids from the town and showing him this body that he stabbed to death in the woods for 2 weeks, doing guided tours. Nobody in town said anything until somebody from out of town overheard it and then reported it to the cops. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we say that town was messed up. Were the cops in your town like the cops from South Park or something? I mean,
it's a good question. They were village police departments, so they were local. They weren't even town of Huntington or county police. They weren't Suffolk County police. They weren't state police. They weren't town police. They were village police.
yes.
So a hyper localized police force, very small police force as well. Everybody knows each other, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know firsthand of corruption that went on there. I've heard all kinds of stories about people getting beat up by one guy in particular for nothing, and then my dad had an interaction at one point with the same guy, and I watched a kid get arrested for standing on the sidewalk one time. He was right next to me. He hadn't done a thing, and we're just standing there.
Yeah.
I think it was because we had skateboards, but
Probably.
but it was kind of, the cops felt a little bit unpredictable or whimsical, just like all of the violence was. There was like, oh, the cops might give you some problems too if you're not watching out. I mean,
yeah.
So, if you David Breskin did a serious report on the whole thing in Rolling Stone. November 22nd, 1984 is the
Yes.
the issue.
I found that, and I'll link to that as well.
Yeah.
And now here's the funny thing is, so Ricky was not a brilliant young man, and he was misspelling Satan all over town. Did you actually see the actual like satin graffiti?
Oh yeah. I played on the sort of jungle gym where that was all spray painted and stuff.
Good.
Yeah. The interaction you mentioned that my family had with him the spring prior to the murder was, we had, I think it was, I can't remember exactly. I think it was Easter Sunday. Pretty certain that would have been why we were doing what we were doing, but we all jumped in the neighbor's van and went to church. And then from church to the ice cream parlor downtown, it's called the Sweet Shop, still has the best ice cream in the world. Guy wakes up at 2:00 in the morning and makes his own freaking ice cream. And he's like 80 years old. You should get down to the Sweet Shop if you can. But we got our ice cream and we're in this van, pulling down into the park, just mere feet from the ice cream place.
Yeah.
And we called it at the time, we called it the Satan Park. That's what it was called, because that was where those kids dominated that space. Like I wasn't allowed in there alone. That was like, forget it. But we were just looking for a parking spot. So we pull in, and I'm the oldest kid in the van. So I'm on what would be the jump seat, like sitting on the floor between the two driver and the passenger.
Yeah.
And my brother and sister are in the back, and the rest of the kids of this other family are in the back. And suddenly Casso, who I had known and seen because he lived on our block in 1983, he's in the car. He jumped on the running boards and stuck his whole sort of like his torso into the car with like his feet dangling. And he's up above me, and he hissed, like he gave like a devil's hiss, like kind of like a, kind of thing. And he was a big kid. He had these really big eyes. He was quite a handsome boy, really. But he was a larger kid for that age bracket.
Yeah.
And I remember his breath, and he was really in my face, and just, it was a really sudden. And then he pops out, and the lady we were driving with goes, "Jesus loves you."
That's really funny.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, I don't know how he got the name the Acid King, but it reminds me, there was a YouTube comment I saw. It was like on a Richard Ramirez video where it had like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and somebody commented and was like, maybe people wouldn't be serial killers if we stopped giving them such cool names.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
we should just start calling them the small pee killer, and
Yeah.
then we'll stop. We'll
The
stop.
dickweed killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ramirez is that fucking asshole claims Casso as an influence.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah. So fuck him too.
Yeah, no shit. He and you were kind of at, like you've said before, like ground zero of the satanic panic in the 80s, because the West Memphis Three, which they dealt with a lot of incompetence. It appears, that was kind of where you were at was like ground zero for that. That was even
Yeah.
the West
We were
Memphis
like Northport was like the prototype for that whole shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
do you know why
Memphis 3 thing that turned out to, I think that's kind of worse. That poor kid.
Yeah.
Amy and Eccles, man, they didn't do anything. They did nothing, So like, I don't know. That's that's some Southern Gothic shit.
No kidding. Yeah, Damien's got a book, and John Douglas wrote about it in his book Law and Disorder. I don't know if you're familiar with Douglas, but he was one of the original behavioral science unit guys for the FBI, and he's actually gone around and kind of disproven a lot of crap of people who have been claimed of certain things. But Law and Disorder is a good book about some of those kind of injustices. But it kind of reminds me, reading about like Ricky. Did you ever read about the band Mayhem from like Norway? Have you ever?
Yeah, they Varg Vignus or whatever. I forget his.
Yeah.
Who's the other guy? Hellhammer or whatever. I don't forget.
Yeah.
They ate each other, or they ate the singer ate the guitarist or something.
It was like, well, a couple things. There's a movie about it with Macaulay Culkin's little brother and then Val Kilmer's son. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called.
No, I haven't.
It's
our drummer Kevin Garcia, our drummer 2 drummers ago. He's a good friend of mine still. He was really into that whole black metal, church burning, friend killing. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the book Lords of Chaos? It's kind of about
that's the book that he told me to read. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's wild. And yeah, like with Mayhem, like the original singer, I think his name was Death, like shot himself, and then the other guy found him, and then rather than like call the cops, he like posed the body and took a picture, and they used that picture for their like one of their live album covers or something. And then like the bassist like stabbed that guy who took that picture. The bassist ended up stabbing that guy to death. But
Christ.
Yeah, it just listening to the story about Ricky in your hometown, I'm like, that just reminded me of some Norwegian stuff.
It sort of has that vibe. I don't know. Maybe something was in the water, but we also had it's of note that Northport has one of the largest veterans hospitals.
Okay.
In the area.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be surprised to find out that some of those drugs were winding up in the hands of kids, like Dilaudid and all the kind of heavy stuff that they save for people who are suffering after a war, that kind of shit.
That's probably a big piece of the puzzle right there.
Yeah. I mean, where do 17-year-olds get 15 bags of angel dust?
No shit. Yeah.
Like
no shit. I wonder, do you know why he killed himself too, by the way?
Nobody, that part of the story is pretty hard to parse out. There is a report that the other inmates were chanting for him to hang up, which is, kill yourself.
Gee.
But he's a 17-year-old kid, and he was put in, proper jail with adults. So hard to know. It's all sort of like, something. I think that most people in Suffolk County and in particular Northport Village would probably forget the whole episode. But the sad thing is that there's families attached to it, many of whom are still around and still carrying this shit. And it was this weird thing that one week Tom Brokaw was talking about us, and then the next week it was gone.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows?
That's wild. Well, so switching gears, when you were a kid, did you like the movie Rad?
I didn't see Rad for a long time until I got to college and somebody had a VHS. But I did see BMX Bandits.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the one with Nicole Kidman. That was the one that I wrote the song about, and that was like closer to my heart.
Yeah.
For BMX. movies. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten a ride with anybody? Like, so when we were in high school, my best friend and I, we loved Aaron Ross. We loved the whole Sunday and Odyssey team. Shadow Conspiracy was one of my other favorites. Have you ever gotten a ride with any of those guys, or have they used Wheatus music for their videos?
Unfortunately, no, but I can say that in I think it was 2007 or was it 2006? I can't remember which. We did the Rockford, Illinois vintage BMX gathering.
That's cool.
Yeah, and we played a show there. We played a set at this gathering, and my personal BMX hero, Harry Leary, from the original Diamondback Pro team, was there.
Okay, yeah.
So I got to talk to him, and he signed my guitar.
That's cool.
So that was like, you know, it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, I looked at that bike. I could never afford that bike when I was a kid. The Harry Leary Diamondback Turbo was like the ultimate. It was like $500, which back then was like, your parents were like, get the fuck out of here. No way are you getting a bike for $500. Never going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
So I never got that one. I never had one, but I have one now.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah, because you had said that was one thing you did with your royalty money, which is funny because my buddy, when you know, we grew up and we had real jobs, as a single dude, he started buying all of these Sunday parts and putting these like really cool, I don't know how familiar you are with Sunday bikes, but
yeah,
you know, the colors, and like he would do all of these unique with the fluorescent colors. He would get these rare parts, and now he's engaged, and you know, those bikes are buried up in his attic, and I'm sure he's probably questioning if he needs to, you know, sell them. Like I think you said that at one point. So, you know, your bike collection is what helped get you through some when the whole economy was shut down.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, in 2002, 2003, I purchased approximately 40 or 50 vintage BMX frame sets off of eBay.
Where'd you keep them?
I kept them in a basement on shelves, like really carefully placed on
Okay.
shelves, you know.
That's a good idea.
And the idea was, I didn't want to collect bikes really, but I wanted to look at all the stuff that I had seen in magazines up close. When I was a kid, I saw it all in BMX action, and I couldn't ever have it. So I just wanted to look at the stuff and think about, oh, do I want to build a Skyway TA? Or do I want to build a Redline? You know, what about a phase one, like CW phase one with the lightning bolt down the down tube? Like, do I want to build this stuff? And by and by, I watched the price on eBay just tick up and up and up. And I was like, you know what, maybe don't build this stuff. I didn't expect that to start happening.
Yeah.
You know, because when I started collecting, they were cheaper. They were much, much cheaper. Now that stuff is worth thousands, and no, you can't find it. But back in 2002, it was like, it wasn't quite, stuff was only about 15 years old.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a little bit older. Not technically vintage yet, you know.
Yeah.
So but around 2007, 2008 to 2009 was the year that really I had to start selling stuff, because we were very, very broke.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a windfall for us and got us through those thin years, because that stuff aged well. And when I liquidated it, we got more than the money I spent on it. Yeah. So, you know, it was good. It was good that way. We were also like, that was where we were back in this phase of like, okay, we'll buy stuff to tour, and then as soon as we get home, we got to sell all that stuff because we can't afford it, you know.
Yeah.
So we were doing a lot of eBay work back then, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny, dude. Selling on eBay can be a pain. My mom's got an account, so I just have her sell for me. So.
There you go.
So I can't imagine, especially back then. You know, with Teenage Dirtbag, when I first heard it, it wasn't until, you know, this past year, honestly, where I had heard the actual unedited version. I knew that you were saying, you know, her boyfriend brings a gun to school, because I'd read that online. I'd researched it, which is exactly what you kind of said you were hoping would happen when the record label said change it. You know, you were like, no, it's cooler anyway if they have to edit it out, because then people want to know, and then they're going to go research it and stuff. Right. And that was kind of because Columbine was around that time. Have you ever, I know I've heard you talk about, you know, Columbine a little bit. Have you ever read the book called Columbine by Dave Cullen, or have you ever heard of it?
No, I have not. How is it?
It's a really good book. It dispels some of the things, like it dispels a lot of the stuff, and it makes you wonder, you know, well, what the hell were the parents doing? And it also makes you realize that the personality types. There was such a 1 in a million chance of those two becoming friends in the first place. You know, the one kid, they weren't really bullied. The one kid, by any stretch of the imagination, I guess would be cool in some high school standards. You know, he had girlfriends and stuff like that. But it's really interesting, that story about them asking if that girl who had believed in Jesus, somewhat maybe a fabrication. It also has been claimed that it was actually somebody else who lived, you know, who that story was about. But it's worth, you know, if it's worth checking out if anybody's curious about that. And I think that should be a mandatory reading for any teacher or police officer, so they can kind of recognize some of the warning signs, because there's plenty of warning signs that something wasn't right with those kids. So
Yeah, I think that was the beginning of what would now be our sort of stark political divide, right?
yeah,
Like I felt that the coverage of that horror show was sort of groping at the what's the political angle,
yeah,
because of gun control, because of being the Clinton era and the assault weapons ban and all that stuff. It just became overtly political very, very quick. And you know, we scored a film called April Showers that was directed by one of the survivors of the Columbine massacre.
I think
So
I
you
know
could,
somebody who was in that movie as a back. Is that one about a school shooting?
yeah, it is. Yeah, well, it is the telling of the massacre in Columbine. It's his story. I'm just going to look it up for you. It was 2009. We did that, and it was directed by a kid named Andrew Robinson, who's a Columbine survivor. So you know, he was there that day in school, and you know, he called us up. Originally wanted to use Teenage Dirtbag for something, but there was a bit of a hassle with the licensing for it. So I was like, look, let us give you a couple of new songs, and I'll even score one for the sequence. And we went to the premiere and all that stuff. It was a really sad movie, just
Yeah.
kind of so it's just a literal telling of the event, really. You know?
I'm thinking I might have known somebody who was actually a background, like he was just like somebody in the background in the movie, actually. Because if it's the movie I'm thinking of, I'm gonna have to look that up later on. But I am definitely familiar with the name of it. But yeah, that was kind of a wild time period, you know, for that song to come out and everything. Um, Now, was your family? You had an interesting story, I believe. Was your family from Ireland? Is that right?
My grandmother on my
Yeah.
father's side is from Ireland. Yeah,
Okay.
she was she was born in Ireland. She died when my father was very young.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't know that side of the family until we were, you know, in our 30s.
Yeah.
Mostly because my dad was essentially an orphan. His father died in an accident at work a few years later, so he didn't really like have strong family ties to her side of the family at all.
Yeah.
And we barely knew his father's side of the family. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of like mix in my family. My mother's Italian side is part Austrian Jew, and my father is English and Irish, and it's like just kind of all mixed up, you know.
That's
But,
cool though.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got the Italian, the Jew. I mean, those are all cool heritage, man. No, there's a book I read in high school by Frankie McCourt, and I believe he's from like an Irish. I think it's kind of, and I was trying to find the book before we got on. I don't know where the heck it's at in my library, but I think it's like about him growing up in Ireland, I believe. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to look foolish when this comes out, but it's kind of when you were talking I heard you tell a story about your grandma, and it just kind of reminded me about that book. So, well,
Yeah.
did you have any you know, I know you're a big Star Trek fan. You're a big pro wrestling fan too, right?
Well, so that's a funny story. Matthew, our bass player, is a much bigger pro wrestling fan than I am.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie about that. I was really into the Ultimate Warrior when I was a kid.
Yeah.
the great Kamala, obviously, Jimmy Superfly Snuka and like all of those old school guys. But it was, it was a little phase, I guess. Not quite. I didn't really follow it all the way up into like modern wrestling, but was drawn back into the wrestling world as an adult when I learned about our friend Spider Nate Webb, who's been coming out into the ring to Teenage Dirtbag for 21 years now.
Yeah.
So,
So that's what that song's about. I didn't know the Spider-Man web song. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's the theme song to his cooking show. He asked me to do him a theme song, and he's from Indiana, so I put on sort of like an Axl Rose vibe, and I went for it. But
that makes sense now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. I wore a Sting shirt today because I'm like, he loves professional wrestling, I think. So I had to bust out a wrestling shirt. But I like did you know that Sting and Ultimate Warrior were like roommates in college?
I did not know that. No.
It wasn't college. It was like when they were starting out, is what I meant to say. There's a great documentary. So when I was a kid, I went through this huge wrestling phase, and my parents were their first date was actually at a wrestling match, and so my dad worked for Cox Cable, and I think he got the tickets for free. And my dad had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and then my mom had 2 kids from a previous marriage. And one of my brothers had said that he remembered being really afraid of my mom going to the match because he was afraid that Rick Rude would grab her out of the audience and kiss her. But
so you grew up in like a Brady Bunch situation, I guess.
Yeah, the age gap, the closest in age is 12 years.
Okay, wow, that's interesting.
So
you have multi-generational perspective in your sibling group. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, I would listen to my brothers tell these crazy stories about fights as kids. And when I was a kid, like we didn't fight, right. Maybe with your best friend, you might have a back and forth one day playing football or something, but that's, but like no crazy street fights. And like, man, my brothers are telling me like the closest in age is telling a story once where the neighbor was beating him up and he remembers just getting thrown around by this kid. And he's like, I'll never forget looking up and seeing our oldest brother riding shirtless with a bandana on. This is all like in the 80s on a BMX bike, ghost ride the BMX bike and grab the neighbor and start beating him up. And I'm like, dude, I didn't have any of those stories. I went to martial art. I was in martial arts as a kid. I got like a junior black belt in 7th grade. And so I appreciate my parents putting me in that because I didn't have, the brothers to toughen you up. But I always wanted to relate to my brothers so bad with just their cool stories as kids. And like I said, by the time I was a kid, things were different. Kids weren't really beating each other up like that.
Well, I think that's a good thing. I mean, it is a really narrow set of experiences that I can beneficially call on from that period. Yeah. And it isn't good for your socialization. It's not good for being a functional adult. It's not good for really anything, and there are certain situations where I'll be a better person to be next to, but that's like a worst case scenario that almost never happens, thankfully. And I just feel like, the shit that we went on back then has sort of gone away, and that's the best that could have happened. Like we're moving away from that. We were talking on tour, we were at a restaurant and we were having a conversation about like what exactly is an abusive boss. Is an abusive boss somebody who sort of is willing to embarrass you in front of the rest of your coworkers? Is that problematic? Or obviously, and I was like, guys, when I worked at the fish market when I was 14 years old, if I fucked up, they would threaten to drown me in the lobster tank, and they weren't kidding. So it's a different culture now. Totally different set of rules. And and Matthew, our bass player, made the point. He's like, yeah, but we're moving away from that, and that's a good thing. And I was like, I totally agree with you. But there is something about getting knocked around a little bit to get you a little harder to shake up, I guess. Like I don't my nerves don't go into overdrive at the drop of a hat. It has to be something crazy to get my blood pressure going, So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a different experience, life experience, I think, for the better, I would say.
I was on a jog last night kind of thinking about, like, there wasn't a crazy, I saw enough fights in high school to be desensitized to it. Now, yeah, people fought in high school, but like, it was a big deal if you got into a fight. I mean, like, they
Right.
would file police reports. It wasn't like sit in the principal's office and then go home, or
Yeah.
even just get suspended. Like, there was serious repercussions to getting into a fight at school. And so you saw a couple a year. But no, I don't know. I was just randomly thinking about that last night. And my first job, well, my real first job was, I started off as a lifeguard, and then after that I was in a restaurant, and I was 15, and I worked with like all felons, crazy tough dudes. And I was lucky that they all had these insane life stories, but they would always tell me, don't be like me. Here's where I went wrong, and don't be like me. And so your story of like the lobster harbor, I can kind of relate to. Do you by chance remember the movie Boys Don't Cry?
I remember the film being out, but I don't think I've ever seen it. Is that about the Laramie, Wyoming murder? Is that what that is about?
No, so it's in Nebraska. There was a girl named Brendan Tina, um, and she was transgender, and she was I don't know if that's the his actual name, but he was in southern Nebraska basically, and in an area where that wasn't really heard of in that part of the state. And so these two guys had found out, and Brendan was raped, and then they had killed him and some people at this house that they were at, like in cold blood. And there's a movie about it with Hilary Swank. And anyway, I worked with the guy that shared a cell with one of the guys that had murdered Brendan. And so I work with some real pirates who had been in the hard prisons of Nebraska, and then to work alongside of them and hear their life stories and hear them talk about prison, and then talk about where they messed up and how to not end up like them, was actually a very powerful thing. But when I read about the Brendan Tina story, man, it makes my stomach hurt. And I actually called up one of my coworkers because I was like, dude, this whole thing is so messed up, and asking him questions about what it was like sharing a cell with him. And I don't know. He told me some details that I don't know if they're true or not, so I won't say them about what this guy's really like in real life. But yeah, man. I work with some hard ass dudes too when I was when I was a teenager.
Well, I find it very hard to have compassion for people who go that distance to hurt somebody else.
Of course.
No, I feel like, well, what's there in you to save?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just rot in jail instead? I don't want to think of, why should any of us have to think about you again? You can call it vindictive. It certainly isn't the Christian attitude,
Yeah.
like forgiveness, turn the other cheek, compassion, second chances, and all that stuff. I know lots of people who deserve second chances, but I don't think anybody who murders anybody in cold blood because of something like that.
Yeah, no, the two guys who did it are in jail, and I think they're on death row. I mean, they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Fuck them. Fuck them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an awful thing of in the southern part of the state, like 30, 40 years ago. But yeah, man, no, what I've heard you say too. So throwing lobster cages as a kid, did that truly mess your back?
Man, I'm sitting here. You see me leaning on the console right now. I tweaked my back this morning. On tour, you're lifting a lot of heavy cases all the time, and if you do your exercises every day, sit-ups or whatever, which I do, you can avoid injury. But a couple of days in a row, I was stupid and didn't do my morning exercises, didn't stretch out, and still did the heavy lifting. And
yeah, it's
funny, none of that did it. But we were in Memphis and playing this great show where we were direct support to Everclear in this little rock club. It was awesome. Yeah. It was kind of like a CBGB's vibe, and the stage was a little bit lower than the subwoofer bins in front of it.
Okay.
And I went to step out on the subwoofer bin like a fucking rock star,
Yeah.
tweaked my back because it was just about 2 inches higher than the stage, and just that little like, oops, like
Yeah.
it's like I'll always have like little issues with the center of my back and my lower back because of the, like trying to show off lifting lobster crates with these dudes when I was younger. But yeah, you're just trying to keep up with the old men.
When you were alive and that happened, what did you do? Were you able to play it off, or what'd you do?
Well, I immediately start stretching the other side to make sure that, like just pretending like on the stage, like, hey, how's everybody doing tonight? So like, I'm very frank about being 47 years old and sort of like things are starting to break down.
Yeah.
Not my voice yet, gratefully, but parts of my back and my hips, because I've been standing on stage for about 25 years now, operating foot pedals at the same time,
Yeah.
So it's like always been this sort of like little ballet, and it's you're wearing a guitar and your body's a little bit like your posture's not great,
Yeah.
So that happens after a while. You start to get a little tweaked, but it's the only answer. You can go to a chiropractor, you can have surgery, but the only answer is to strengthen the areas around it. It's typically, flexibility and strength training in some way. So yoga, swimming, lots of stretching in the morning. First thing in the morning, just start stretching, and that all helps quite a bit. BMX, uphill BMX around my neighborhood. I have a lot of hills here in the Bronx.
Okay.
And it helps. It certainly helps.
What BMX bike do you have right now that you ride?
So I ride. I have a few different cruisers that I rotate. I have an SE Racing Stu Thompson Replica 24, which is the most recent. You can actually grab one of those on eBay right now. They're kind of secondhand after the first wave of being out, but it's the original quad angle frame where the down tubes wrap around the bottom bracket, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And then I have two other frames that are a lot like that were made by Supercross. The BMX racing company Supercross. They make sort of modern Olympic style racing bikes.
Okay, I'd have to look them up. I don't remember. We always did like street stuff. I didn't do a whole lot of mountain or racing stuff. So some of those companies I'm not as familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah. Supercross is basically single speed BMX racing company.
Okay.
Real sleek, really well-made stuff. But they did a few tribute bikes back in like 2004, 2005, where people were asking for what never existed, which was a 24-inch quad angle cruiser. And they made it with a really low bottom bracket, so like a extremely sloped geometry. It's very low center of gravity, and those are my favorite. They're really fast. They turn really tight. Yeah, that's the one I ride mostly. It's called a Skunk Quad Angle or a Skunk Works Quad Angle by Supercross. They're hard to find. I think there's only like 50 of them made. But
nice. Well, congratulations on grabbing that.
Yeah.
When you were telling your stage story, it reminded me a couple of years ago, I was on stage and it was an outside festival thing. And I was wearing these bright, like fluorescent yellow swim trunks that had like bomb pops on them. And I was shirtless. And I've got a pretty hairy chest, and I don't shave it enough. I don't have tattoos. I just got hair. So I was on stage singing, and I went to do like I did like the Exorcist backwards, handstand, kind of like what Bray Wyatt does in WWE. So I was singing like that. And then when I got out of it, my back, like I was in so much pain. If nobody was around, I might've let some tears come out. I mean,
no, man,
something was wrong. So then in my head, I'm thinking, if I slow, because I jump around, I move a lot on stage, and I'm thinking, if I slow down now, everyone's gonna know that I messed my back up, and I'm gonna look stupid. So I was like, the only answer is to just jump higher. And so I was jumping, and I just remember being in midair, like, God, this is gonna hurt so bad when I land. And I kept it up, and I don't know, the adrenaline or something carried me through the show, and I ended up being fine, but it hurt so bad that I literally thought about being like, stop, just everybody stop.
Oh man, that sucks. Sorry to hear that, dude. That's rough. That is amazing. It's amazing what the adrenaline can do to the pain, right? Yeah. It's almost like they're at loggerheads, like you must continue. You gotta stop. You must continue. It's like I've been in that situation a few times where I've been pretty tweaked. I'm like, how am I doing this?
Yeah. I've never ever stopped a song. Like I'll hear bands where they'll start to play a song, then they'll stop and like restart it. And I've never done that. And so even if we're all off and it's just shitty, you know, I just kind of a lot of times I just kind of smile and like wink to the audience, like I know this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I'm
I'm
in on the
actually
joke as
into
well.
I'm into stopping a song if something's gone wrong. We did that
Really?
one song. One time we on this past run we were in Fort Worth, and I totally fucked up the first chorus of this Rush cover song called "Time Stand Still" that we do.
Yeah.
And I just knew, I was like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place. And you know, there's no if you fuck up a Rush song, there ain't no recovery. It's
Yeah.
over. So I stopped mid song and I was like, hold on, I fucked up the chorus. Let's go from that chorus. 1, 2, 3, 4. We just went back in, you know.
Good.
And my band are you know, tidy enough to pull something like that off, and that's why I'm lucky. But the fact of the matter is, I saw Metallica when I was 14 on the Justice for All tour,
Yeah.
and they started and stopped like 3 songs. And it was so cool because they'd be like, they bust into a track and be like, no, fuck that. I don't want to play that shit. Fuck that. And then walk away from the mic and then come back and start a new one. And it was just like, this
Dude,
like
badass.
chaos. Yeah. It was like so cool. It was a much cool. I'd never seen a proper, you know, arena band do some shit like that, where it was like sort of flying by the seat of their pants. You know, it was awesome.
Yeah. There's like 2 ways to do it. Well, there's like, if you I've heard that too, like Metallica even in their earliest days would be like, no, stop, we're redoing it, because they're playing it for them. And when you're restarting for yourself, that's pretty badass.
Yeah.
I've seen it done out of insecurity, and it's like, hey, and it's like, just you got to power through. And the last time I saw Motley Crue live, and Motley is one of my favorite bands, actually I think every time I've seen them, there might have been like hiccups here or there, and it was cool because you would see them all look at each other, and then they get back on the right track. And I remember last time my brother looked at me and was like, they fucked up, it's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
you know, just to like, yeah, this truly is live.
I mean, even the best, even Rush. I've seen Rush fuck up. I saw AC/DC fuck up one time, you know, like,
oh wow.
just tiny little moves. But you're talking about like human beings, you know,
Yeah.
at the top of their game, executing something really wonderful. And I'm kind of there for the fuck up. It's fine, you know?
Yeah, I think so too. I always like to know what my hero's downfalls are, to see him make a mistake, because it's like when I was a kid, like I loved Walter Payton. You know, he's like my favorite football player, and there was a book that came out called Sweetness where they talked about like some of his downfalls, and some people didn't like it. But as a kid, man, like I looked up to guys like that, and I just thought they never made mistakes. They were good instantly and stuff like that. It wasn't until I was an adult and I started to read books where I started to realize, like, no, that's not the case. They just had something that they cared enough to power through.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I like to see I like to see the mistakes. It sucks to have an off night. I mean, obviously, if the whole night's off, you know, that's not cool, or if the energy's not there. But so do you want to talk a little bit about your tour right now? You're going out with
Sure.
Everclear. You've got a few great bands that are going to be here. It starts in September.
Yeah, it was the second leg. We did the first leg in July of the
Yeah.
Summerland tour. Summerland, if you don't know, is Art Alexakis from Everclear. It's his sort of like his invention, you know.
Yeah.
Really eclectic, very interesting, super fun, high value, if I might also say,
Yeah.
because you, for the ticket price, you get to see, you know, Everclear, you know, Art being, I think, one of the best American songwriters, and Living Color, who are basically the greatest American rock and roll band currently. You know what I mean? It's like they're like the sort of Led Zeppelin of America, for my money. And and you're in a situation where Hoobastank is on there, and you forget like how many songs from Hoobastank you actually know.
Yeah.
Like I was just first couple of nights watching the whole set, like, oh yeah, this track, holy shit, they did this one. That's right. And like it's just like you got a deep bench there of songs and performers and songwriters, and you know, everybody is kind of like super like sober, you know, focused on their craft, and for us it was this learning experience of just coming into this like this master class and like how to pull this off, how to do this for the long term. You know, Living Color's been on the road and making records for what, 40 years now or some crazy shit. You know, Everclear's been out for 30 years. Hoobastank's been out for about as long as we have. So it's just like and they had American success, which eluded us initially. So just getting a view of all of that has been really incredible, and the vibe is clicking really hard. Everybody's sort of getting along, and it's like this weird little family, you know, these 4 bands who come from different places but are all there to do the same thing, and that is to pull off this show for people after this bullshit that everyone's been through, you know, like really try and bring a proper show. So and it's so it's us, Hoobastank, Living Color, and Everclear, and we're starting the second leg of the tour September 7th in, I think it's Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And then we're doing sort of like a loop of the upper Midwest and the Midwest, all the way as far over to Idaho, I think we're going. And then I think there might be a Denver date on there. You can go to summerlandtour.net and get all the info.
Yeah. And
it's
on
super cool.
Each band, has the tour dates posted too.
Yeah. It's really, I also say that it's like it's this super cool honor, like to be given this chance, because like I said, in the States, we haven't really done a lot of work. We actually moved to England early on and lived in the United Kingdom because that was where everything was happening for us, and sort of lost sight of the American markets for a while. And I don't know what's going on with Teenage Dirtbag, but somehow it's sort of like bubbling back up into the culture somewhere.
Yeah.
And Art's calling us up to find out what we're doing. It's like, wow,
man,
man, I'm a really big fan. You know?
He's got not just a cool singing voice, he's got a cool voice. Like, just his talking voices, I think it's cool. Before I forget this, are you familiar with the wrestler CM Punk?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever notice
not personally, but
did you ever notice like he would come out to the Living Color song, the Cult of Personality?
Yeah, and didn't they just recently license it for the WWE or AEW?
Maybe, but when he started doing that, I remember being like, "Whoa, this is like the coolest entrance song." Like it never clicked in my mind, but I'm like, that's like that was like a badass
damn right
song.
Yeah, super cool.
Like the great, it's great for wrestling because like, you know, you hear that and it stops, you know, for a second, the guitar pauses, and it's like, you know, the pop of the crowd of like, he's coming. So I thought that was pretty brilliant on whether it's him or whoever who picked that. But could you tell the story real fast too on I think it's brilliant why you're doing this, but so that maybe the listeners who don't know the background, why you are re-recording Teenage Dirtbag and your first album. I think what you're doing is kind of brilliant. If you could kind of explain how some of that licensing works with
right. So over the years, it was always kind of suspicious to us that anytime we had a license proposal for television or for a video game or for a movie, if they needed separate parts of the song, like the vocal and the instrumental or just a guitar part or just the beat, if that was required, the deal always fell through. It never saw the light of day. And I was kind of suspicious about that because I had given, 5 sets of those master tapes to our record label back in the day. Yeah. And I was suspicious about, well, maybe they don't exist anymore, or maybe they've been misplaced or they got destroyed or something like that. So I inquired over the years and never got a response. So in 2014, I brought the sort of penultimate set of masters to to a transfer facility called Dream Hire here in New York City. Yeah. And I was able to salvage most of the rhythm tracks of the original first album. Bass, guitar, drums were mostly intact. Almost all of the vocals were missing. Except oddly the girl part from Teenage Dirtbag, the original girl part. And a whole bunch of other stuff was just wasn't there, or it was like digitally corrupted during the transfer. So, but we did get all of the tempos and all of the original sort of drum and bass rhythmic information, and we replaced everything one at a time. We just like did a new version of it on every instance, and eventually wound up with a new set of masters that are faithful to the original, on the original template, if you will. And it's good because now we finally are in Rock Band. We're finally on the DLC for that. And the other stuff, to be able to give people instrumentals. A couple of licenses have come in already for that, stuff we could never do in the past. And the other thing is that you work so hard at creating this thing, and then suddenly it doesn't exist anymore. But it has this value. It has this inherent value culturally, and we just felt like, nah, let's fix that. Let's fill that hole and fill that gap and finish this record properly. And it's kind of a pain in the butt because it's like there's no creative energy to it. You're rehashing something, you're recreating something that you already know how it goes. So it's much more of a forensic exercise than anything else. So you don't have that when you make a new record. You have that sort of like bubbling creative, discovery process, and none of that was happening here. So it was tedious, but we finished it, and I'm halfway through mixing. We have 8 of the songs that we've recorded are already on Spotify: Teenage Dirtbag, Mope, I'd Never Write a Song About You, Hump 'Em and Dump 'Em, Temporary Song, FBSM, what else? I think there's another. Through, a song that Joey Slater, our backing vocalist, wrote. And what is the other one? They're on there somewhere. Let me check the Spotify.
Yeah, they're all on the Apple Music as well. That's right. That's what I use.
But there's 8 of them. 8 of them from the album. 8 out of 20 are already up. Oh. And by Christmas, we're looking to have the other 12 up there. Repackage the whole thing. So it's the original 10 songs from album 1, plus about I think we have 11 songs in the vault that are finished that we just from over the years. They sounded so much like they belonged on album 1 that we didn't record them, So that extra batch is coming. So it's going to be a 20-song album for I think after the pandemic now and all this touring that we're doing. Realistically, it's going to be probably Christmas 2021 that we're going to finish the whole package. Okay. Have a special vinyl edition and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, a year late, but we're kind of getting there. Yeah.
Nice. Well, very nice. And Brendan, thank you for coming on Book Brilliant. I'm gonna end this recording in a second, but if you could stay on the line for a minute.
Of course.
But yeah, everybody check out the new recordings. It's a brilliant idea what they're doing. Summerland tour, it's going to be great. I'm hoping to meet all you guys in Omaha when you come through September 25th. So, all right, man. Well, thank you everyone for listening. All right. What did you think? Did you think that he was a nice guy? I thought he was a nice guy. It was a lot of fun talking to him. I'm going to tell you some of my favorite songs from Wheatus because there's a lot of focus on, Teenage Dirtbag, and he had a couple other hits there. So listening through all of the albums, and I don't know if I'm going to put this in the show notes, so this part you might just have to go look up yourself. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. My favorite songs from Wheatus, besides, Teenage Dirtbag or Lemonade, on their first album, the Wheatus album, he's got a song called Love is a Mutt from Hell. I really like that one. His cover of A Little Respect, I like that one. Anyway, the song Anyway, which is on the Hand Over Your Loved Ones album, I like that one. From Listening to Lightning, that's on the Pop Songs in Death Volume 1. I like that song. 14, from their Valentine LP. I thought that was a great song, and I told him that. And then Tipsy Remix, which was a single. I really enjoy that as well. So take a listen to those and then go see him on tour. Wheatus is everywhere on social media. On Instagram, they're Wheatus Official. So follow him on that. Follow him on Twitter, Facebook. The Summerland Tour again. Everclear, Living Color, Hoobastank, Wheatus. You got to go see it if you get the chance, if they come into your area. But I will say this about with Brendan. I think he's going to be back on the show. Maybe once, maybe twice. We talked a little bit afterwards about a couple specials that I ran by him, and he seemed kind of excited about the idea of them as well. And so, we will be linking back up again. It might be a couple months, but I believe that he will be back soon. So that's great. Again, if you like what we're doing here, please check Book Brilliant out everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok even. bookbrilliant.com. You can find us everywhere. We're getting a few things still set up. We're kind of moving fast and breaking things. We want to get this content out as soon as possible, and we're ironing out the everything else as we go along. But the transcriptions and the books, that's the most important thing. The episodes themselves, those are all out there, and I hope that you are finding value in this. And one of the best ways that you can support us right now, honestly, is to share this with somebody. If you like this and you get 2, 3, 5 people to listen, that it would do us a lot of good, because we're at the point now where the most important thing is just getting people to know that we exist and listen to us. So I hope you have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, because these interviews really do make my day better when I talk to these people, and Brendan was very much that way as well. So thank you. Have a great day.